The sky had been quiet for months, just the slow hum of data, the patient eyes of telescopes watching the dark. Every night, scientists across the world waited, not for something dramatic, not for discovery, but for confirmation. Another visitor was coming, a small object from beyond our solar system, the third ever found. They called it 3I Atlas. To most, it was just another interstellar body, a traveler made of dust and ice, crossing billions of miles of empty space. But to the people tracking it, something about this one felt different. It wasn't its speed. It wasn't its path. It was the way it moved, like it knew it was being watched. In observatories from Hawaii to Chile, from Japan to the Canary Islands, the world's most advanced instruments locked their gaze on a faint streak against the black. It shimmered, then vanished, appeared again, vanished once more. At first, they thought it was interference, a trick of the sensors, maybe sunlight bouncing off fragments, but it wasn't, because the pattern repeated itself. With impossible precision, every few hours, the same rhythm, the same pulse, like a slow heartbeat flickering across the void. One scientist described it as a whisper beneath the light. Another called it the object that looks back. It wasn't supposed to do that. Comets and asteroids follow predictable physics. Light in, reflection out. They don't decide when to shine. They don't react. But 3I Atlas did, and that was the first moment, when the silence of space started to feel alive. When the first data came in, the light curve made no sense. Instead of a smooth, fading arc of brightness, the kind every comet produces as sunlight reflects off its surface. The readings were jagged, unstable, almost intentional. Astronomers checked their equipment, they recalibrated their systems, they waited for consistency. But the inconsistency was the pattern. Every observation changed the next one, as if the object was aware it was being measured. Weeks passed. Atlas drew closer to the sun, nearing its perihelion, the point in its orbit where it would shine the brightest. Usually, this is when comets flare in beautiful arcs of gas and ice, lighting up the sky. But this one didn't behave like a comet at all. Instead of brightening, it dimmed. Its reflectivity dropped, almost like it was pulling in the light rather than giving it away. That's not how physics works. Not for something made of ice and dust, and yet, the data didn't lie. Late one night, in a small control room in New Mexico, a young astronomer named Elias watched the newest data stream in. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it was fatigue. But the numbers were real. A pattern was forming in the light curve, geometric, repeating, precise. The object wasn't tumbling randomly through space. It was rotating and modulating. Elias leaned forward, whispering to himself, "This isn't natural." He wasn't the only one. Across the world, others were seeing the same thing. Different telescopes, different hemispheres, same anomaly. By the end of that week, the data was undeniable. Atlas wasn't reflecting light like a normal body. It was controlling it. The peaks and troughs in its curve matched mathematical ratios. 3:1, 5:2, 8:5. Patterns found in engineered systems, not random debris. The chatter in private research. Channels grew louder. Some said it was a new kind of reflective mineral. Others believed it was something much more complicated, something built. But in official press releases, agencies stayed silent. No one wanted to use the word artificial, not yet. Then came the energy spike. On a quiet Tuesday morning, a cluster of satellites in Earth's orbit detected a brief surge, a narrow beam of radiation streaming directly from 3I Atlas. It lasted only a second, but its timing matched perfectly with a dimming event recorded by ground telescopes. It was as if the object had flashed and then gone back to sleep. Scientists reviewed the data 100 times. No natural explanation fit. Nothing about it matched solar flares, cosmic rays, or dust reflections. It looked more like a signal than a flare. By now, curiosity had turned into quiet unease. In every space agency, every university, everyone felt it. That strange shift between discovery and fear. What if it wasn't just passing through? What if it was here, for a reason? Elias kept staring at the live feed, night after night. he noticed something subtle. Whenever the telescopes adjusted their focus, the object's brightness fluctuated slightly, almost like a blink. Could an object respond to being observed? It sounded impossible, but the data suggested exactly that. Observation wasn't passive anymore. It was interaction. The headlines, when they finally appeared, were cautious. 3i Atlas shows unusual reflectivity. Interstellar object exhibits unknown optical behavior. But behind closed doors, the tone was different. Astrophysicists whispered about active modulation, about feedback loops that shouldn't exist, about the unsettling idea that light, the most passive force in the universe, was being used as communication. They weren't ready to believe it, but they couldn't ignore it either. And so, the world waited for more data, waited for a model that could explain it, waited for something that felt like truth. Each night, telescopes turned their gaze back to the same patch of sky, searching for a reason, but the universe doesn't hand out reasons easily. Sometimes, it just watches back. In the final days before perihelion, the object brightened once more, not gradually, but suddenly, like a flare lighting up the darkness. For 47 minutes, it shone with the intensity of a small star. Then, just as quickly it went dim. In that silence, sensors across the world recorded one final flicker in its light curve. A perfect, repeating pattern. 0, 1. Binary. Just enough to make everyone stop breathing. No one knew what it meant. No one could prove it was intentional. But from that moment on, the waiting sky didn't feel the same. It wasn't just the vastness of space anymore. It was a question without an answer. And as 3i Atlas drifted closer to the sun, the world realized something quietly terrifying. Maybe this wasn't the first time we were being watched. Maybe it was just the first time. We noticed. At first it looked like noise, just another tiny ripple lost inside the ocean of cosmic data. But the more they studied it, the less random it became. Beneath the faint glow of 3i Atlas, hidden deep inside its light curve, a pulse emerged, slow, steady, and impossibly precise. Every 11.3 hours, the object brightened, and then dimmed, like something inside it was moving, like something was breathing. In the cold control rooms of observatories scattered across the world, researchers sat in silence, watching the numbers loop again and again. Every cycle was identical, every fluctuation perfectly timed. At first, they thought it was rotation, the simple turning of a rocky body reflecting sunlight. But when they plotted the data, the pattern didn't match any known spin model. Natural bodies flicker when they rotate because their surfaces are uneven, rough, jagged, chaotic. But this flicker was clean, too clean. It was as if 3i Atlas had a smooth, reflective surface that turned with purpose. In Hawaii, at the Mauna Kea Observatory, Dr. Sato stared at the glowing graph on her monitor. She had been tracking interstellar objects for over a decade, but she had never seen a light pattern like this. It wasn't just light, it was rhythm, a heartbeat written in photons. She leaned closer to the screen and whispered, "It's counting." Across the planet, others began to notice the same thing. Teams in Chile and South Africa compared their data, and the pulse was there, perfectly synchronized, visible from every angle of observation. Whatever 3i Atlas was doing, it wasn't a local phenomenon. It was global. Something deep within the object seemed to emit its own faint light. Not reflected sunlight, but radiation, and it pulsed with machine-like regularity. As the signal repeated, the mystery deepened. Why 11.3 hours? Why that specific rhythm? The number didn't match any natural resonance or orbital period. It wasn't tied to solar radiation, or gravitational tides, or known comet behavior, and yet, it never missed a beat. Even when solar winds surged and instruments wavered, the pulse held steady, as if the object were running on its own internal clock. When scientists overlaid the signal on historical data, something even stranger appeared. The same rhythm, faint, almost invisible, had been present weeks before anyone noticed it, hidden beneath noise, waiting to be found. That realization sent chills through the research teams. Because if it had been there the whole time, it meant the object was constant, deliberate. It wasn't just reacting to sunlight, it was maintaining something. The discovery leaked quietly into the scientific community. Papers were drafted, then withdrawn. Discussions moved into encrypted chat rooms and private emails. Nobody wanted to sound crazy, but everyone felt the same unease. A silent understanding that something inside that distant rock was alive with purpose. One late-night call between two research teams. A small detail changed everything. When they plotted the energy spikes from different telescopes, they found that each one arrived slightly out of sync, by milliseconds. At first, it seemed like a data error, but when they mapped those delays in three-dimensional space, a shape emerged. The pulse wasn't just repeating, it was rotating, like a beam spinning slowly through the dark, sweeping across the solar system with mechanical precision. Every 11.3 hours, that beam faced Earth, and when it did, the brightness peaked. In that moment, the light curve stopped being a curve. It became a message. Something was turning toward us. Again and again, by now the world's major space agencies were. Alert the European Southern Observatory issued a notice to all participating telescopes to maintain continuous observation. NASA quietly retasked one of its deep space antennas to monitor the radiation frequency. And somewhere in the background, unnamed government networks started listening too, but still, there was no sound, no radio transmission, only light, a pulse of energy, repeated endlessly across billions of kilometers. Dr. Sato stayed awake for 3 nights straight, staring at the latest spectral graphs. She noticed faint harmonics surrounding the main pulse, subtle fluctuations that followed ratios found in human music. Octaves, fifths, and thirds, coincidence maybe, but her gut said otherwise. She saved the file and labeled it Echo Beneath the Light Curve. Meanwhile, astronomers everywhere debated what the echo could mean. Some argued it was rotational tumbling, an elongated object spinning unevenly. Others suggested a binary companion, a smaller fragment orbiting the main body, creating repeating reflections, but none of those explanations fit the data. The pattern was too perfect, too stable. It was as though the object wasn't just reflecting sunlight, it was using it. As 3i Atlas continued its journey toward the sun, the pulse began to intensify. Each cycle grew slightly brighter than the last. It was faint, but measurable. It was like watching something wake up. Elias, the same young astronomer who had first noticed the strange light shifts, stayed glued to his monitor. He replayed the sequence over and over, his heart pounding. He could feel something in the data, a structure, a logic. He wrote in his notes, "It's not random. It's waiting for something." He didn't know what that meant, not yet. A few days later, the pulse changed. Not the timing, that stayed perfect, but the brightness. It dimmed suddenly, then surged, like a breath being drawn. For nearly 3 hours, instruments worldwide recorded an erratic flicker. Then, the signal returned to normal. When the data was analyzed, they found that the anomaly matched the exact moment Earth crossed a specific point in its orbit. The point where the Sun, Earth, and 3i Atlas lined up perfectly. The alignment had triggered the shift. But why? Had it sensed us? Theories poured in. Some said it was coincidence. Some said it was reflection geometry. Others weren't so sure. One physicist, speaking anonymously, put it this way: when a machine aligns with its observer, it changes behavior. That's not random. That's interaction. The world didn't know it yet, but this was the moment everything changed. The first real sign that the universe might not be silent after all. The pulse beneath the light curve had become a rhythm of anticipation, a steady, patient countdown echoing across the stars. And though the numbers looked like data, to those who listened closely, it felt like something more, like a knock at the edge of understanding, a whisper through the static of creation itself. Something out there was awake, and for the first time, it wanted us to notice. Space is supposed to be predictable. Cold things stay cold. Hot things stay hot. And every object near the sun obeys the same simple rule. The closer you get, the warmer you become. But 3i Atlas didn't follow the rule. As it drifted toward the sun, scientists expected to see its surface temperature rise, just like any comet made of ice and dust. The models were clear. The math was certain. There were no surprises left until the data arrived. The infrared sensors picked up something strange, a heat signature that pulsed instead of rising. At first, it spiked higher than predicted, then, within minutes, dropped far below freezing. It didn't make sense. The object was heating up without sunlight, then cooling while facing the sun. That shouldn't be possible. Not in this universe. In Chile, a team at the Paranal Observatory checked their instruments again and again. They swapped filters, recalibrated sensors, and even blamed the desert wind for distorting the readings. But every check came back clean. The numbers were real. The comet, if that's what it was generating heat, and no one knew how. Across the Pacific, Elias sat alone in his dimly lit control room, his face glowing in the light of a single monitor. The thermal graph danced before him. Red, blue, red again. It looked alive. Each pulse followed a rhythm, like the object was breathing energy in and out, heating itself when it was hidden, cooling when it was seen, like it was aware of the light. He whispered under his breath. It's controlling its temperature. At first, the scientific community refused to accept it. It had to be an artifact, a sensor glitch, a solar reflection, maybe even a gas jet firing beneath the surface. But when the James Webb Telescope confirmed the same readings from deep space, everything changed. The heat wasn't coming from surface activity. It was coming from within. By now, the term anomaly had become standard in every report. They called it a thermal inversion pattern, though no one really knew what that meant. Every hour, the object's temperature shifted in a way no natural body could reproduce. One moment, it glowed like warm iron. The next, it sank to the chill of deep space, and in between, it hovered in impossible balance, as if maintaining a threshold. A physicist from Cambridge described it best. It's as if something inside is regulating itself, like it's protecting its core. Those words spread through the research channels like wildfire. Protecting, regulating. Intelligent verbs for something that shouldn't think. But what if it did? A week later, the first spectral scan revealed an even deeper mystery. Inside the infrared data, researchers noticed fine lines, thin, repeating patterns that appeared every time the temperature shifted. They weren't random. They were structured. Each spike carried a frequency signature, like a digital code embedded in heat. When analysts converted the data into audio, they heard a soft, rhythmic hum, a tone that rose and fell in harmony with the temperature pulses. It was eerie, mechanical, almost deliberate. By now, everyone studying 3i Atlas felt it, that subtle tension between science and fear, because if the heat was coming from inside, it meant there was a mechanism, and if there was a mechanism, someone built it. The word machine began to slip quietly into conversation, not in official reports, not yet, but in the late-night emails between researchers, too restless to sleep. They spoke in careful hypotheticals. What if it's a probe? What if it's a fragment of something larger? What if it's waiting? No one dared say it out loud, but they all felt it. The slow, rising dread of realization. In a small meeting at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, one analyst presented a 3D model of the object's heat distribution. When played as an animation, the temperature waves didn't spread randomly like melting ice. They flowed in symmetrical bands, wrapping around the body in perfect arcs, not chaos. Design. It looked like thermal control, the kind used in spacecraft to balance temperature between internal systems. Someone whispered, "That's a thermal regulator." The room went silent. If that was true, it meant 3i Atlas wasn't just reacting to sunlight, it was managing itself, absorbing, storing, and releasing energy as needed, just like a living organism, just like a machine. Dr. Sato rechecked the timing of the heat pulses against the light curve from earlier observations. When she overlapped the graphs, her heart stopped. The peaks lined up perfectly. The heat spikes matched the 11.3-hour light cycle. Every time the brightness increased, the object's internal temperature followed, It was synchronized. It wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It was responding to something. The question was, to what? In one encrypted forum, a researcher proposed a haunting theory. What if it's not a comet? What if it's a power source, dormant until sunlight activates it? Others dismissed it as science fiction, but deep down, everyone was thinking the same thing. If 3i Atlas could generate and regulate its own heat, it meant it wasn't dying like a comet. It was alive in its own way. Elias watched the data for hours, his coffee long gone cold. The temperature spikes had become hypnotic, almost beautiful. He imagined the object floating in the void, silent, distant, pulsing with invisible energy, like a heart beating in the dark. He opened his logbook and wrote, "Heat that shouldn't exist, yet it does, like it's remembering what it once was." As the object neared its closest point to the sun, everyone expected it to flare up, to disintegrate, to crumble into dust like every comet before it. But it didn't. Instead, it stabilized, even under intense solar radiation. It maintained a perfect temperature. No melting, no vaporization. It endured. And that was when the last traces of doubt disappeared. Whatever 3i Atlas was, it wasn't built by nature. One final observation came from the European Space Agency. As the object crossed its perihelion, they detected a faint electromagnetic burst, short, rhythmic, and structured, like a ping. It lasted less than a second. Then the temperature dropped again, back to cold, dark silence. Scientists tried to explain it. Internal outgassing, thermal reflection, material stress. But the truth didn't fit any of those words. Something inside that object had chosen to turn on, then off, as if testing itself. And so, the question lingered like an echo through every observatory and every sleepless mind that watched the stars. If it wasn't sunlight that gave it warmth, what did? What kind of machine could drift through the void for eons, awaken near a star, and still remember how to breathe? For months, the path of 3i Atlas had been clean and predictable, a quiet traveler obeying the laws of motion. But then, it changed. It began with a single data anomaly, a few pixels off course in a long exposure from an observatory in Chile. At first, scientists brushed it off. Maybe an error in calibration, maybe a solar flare disrupting the sensors. But then the same shift appeared in Japan, and then again in Spain. By the third confirmation, every scientist watching this object felt it. That slow, creeping realization that something was wrong. Atlas wasn't drifting anymore. It was moving with intention. From millions of kilometers away, its behavior looked subtle, a soft, irregular curve in its orbit. But in the precision world of astronomy, even a millimeter's deviation is a scream, and this was a shout across the void. Every night, telescopes tracked those microbursts of motion, short, impossible spurts of acceleration, as if something inside the comet was pushing back against the solar wind. It wasn't tumbling randomly like other fragments of ice. It seemed to correct itself, like a ship fighting invisible waves. In control rooms around the world, the data was silent but heavy. Screens flickered, graphs dipped, spiked, and held steady again. No one spoke for a while, because there are moments in science when numbers stop being numbers and start becoming questions you don't want answered. Why would an interstellar object change direction on its own? What kind of natural body could resist a force as relentless as the sun? At the European Southern Observatory, Dr. Cato leaned closer to his monitor. He replayed the movement frame by frame, overlaying it on past data. The pattern matched nothing he'd seen. Not gravitational perturbations, not cometary jets, not even radiation pressure. Each burst lasted precisely 9 seconds, and each burst was identical in strength and spacing. He whispered something to himself that the room never forgot. It's steering. Those 2 words would echo through research teams like an unspoken confession. They didn't make sense, and yet deep down, everyone watching that faint, icy glow already knew nature doesn't steer. As 3i Atlas approached its closest point to the sun, perihelion, the phenomenon intensified. Instead of slowing down under solar resistance, it accelerated. It curved slightly off its predicted path. A deflection so exact, so deliberate, it couldn't be coincidence. NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab released a quiet update. The object's trajectory has deviated beyond non-gravitational expectations. It was a sterile way of saying something extraordinary. This interstellar visitor wasn't behaving like an object at all. It was acting like a craft. And yet, no one could say that out loud. Not officially, not in press conferences or papers. Because in science, words like intentional and self-directed belong to fiction, not physics. So they called it the shift, a simple name for something no one dared to understand. Behind closed doors, agencies ran simulations, thousands of them. What kind of energy source could cause such motion? No comet jet could fire so symmetrically. No ice vent could release thrust so consistently. And there was no trace of outgassing. None, just motion, pure mechanical precision. The public didn't know. At least, not yet. Official statements were cautious. Vague mentions of data, irregularities, and non-gravitational effects. But amateur astronomers were faster. They noticed the changes in their backyard telescopes. Comparing orbital predictions online, they saw the drift too, and soon, forums and social feeds began to fill with one haunting question. What if it's not a comet? Meanwhile, radio observatories started picking up something else. Weak bursts of electromagnetic noise, rhythmic, faint, and repeating. Some dismissed it as interference. Others said it matched the timing of 3I Atlas's acceleration bursts. The two events lined up perfectly. Each time the object changed course, a whisper of radio static pulsed across the background, a faint heartbeat under the noise of the cosmos. It was as if the object was signaling before it moved. In the data rooms, scientists were torn between fear and fascination. If it was natural, it meant there were forms of matter or physics we still didn't understand. If it wasn't, then something, or someone, had just entered our system, quietly observing, maneuvering through the light. No thrusters, no exhaust, no visible mechanism. Just a dark body wrapped in frozen dust, moving as if by thought alone. Days passed. The object neared the sun, the moment when most comets begin to break apart. But instead of disintegrating, 3I Atlas seemed to strengthen. Its albedo, the way it reflected light, became more stable, more defined, its motion smoother, cleaner. It was adapting. Astronomers watched as it tilted slightly, aligning itself edge-on toward the sun, minimizing exposure like a spacecraft shielding its instruments. It wasn't survival instinct, it was strategy. That night, as new readings came in, the graph finally leveled out, a perfect, linear track where chaos should have been, and then, for the first time, the object stopped accelerating. It just hovered, a still point, 90 million miles away, balanced between the pull of the sun and the push of its own invisible will. Silence filled the control room. The only sound was the hum of servers and the steady click of data updates. No one dared to breathe. In that moment, every telescope on Earth was aimed at a single speck of light. And in that stillness, they realized something profound. This wasn't random motion. It was a decision, a deliberate pause. As if the object, or whatever commanded it, had reached the point it was meant to, as if it had arrived. When the data transmitted around the world, astronomers didn't know whether to celebrate or fear what they'd just witnessed. Was it a probe, a signal, or simply a form of physics that behaves more like consciousness than matter? No one had the answer, only a question that burned deeper with every new reading. What happens when it decides to move again? Because for the first time in human history, we weren't just observing something from the stars, it was observing us back. Space is rarely quiet. Even the void hums with whispers. Cosmic background radiation, the soft crackle of distant stars, the faint chatter of charged particles bouncing off magnetic fields. But when radio telescopes trained their ears on 3I Atlas, something remarkable happened. Nothing. Complete silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was a perfect void, the kind of absence that feels deliberate. For weeks, observatories across the globe tuned in, sweeping through every frequency, every wave, every band. They expected random noise, weak signals, maybe a whisper of interference. But there was nothing, no signal, no pattern, just emptiness. And yet, that emptiness was strange, because within the void, a faint pulse emerged. It wasn't loud, it wasn't constant. It was a subtle hiss, barely detectable, buried under cosmic background. But it appeared at precise intervals, perfectly aligned with 3I Atlas's rotational phase. Every time the object completed a turn, a whisper flickered through the radio spectrum. Soft, faint, deliberate. It wasn't accidental, it was timed. In Japan, at the Nobayama Radio Observatory, Dr. Hoshino leaned forward, tracing the waveform with a stylus. "It's too exact," she said. "Nature doesn't produce silence with structure. Silence isn't organized. Silence doesn't respond." Her colleague didn't respond. He didn't need to, because the data spoke for itself. Somewhere in that emptiness, 3I Atlas was communicating, or at least behaving as if it were. Across the Pacific, Elias reviewed the same signals streaming from Hawaii. He replayed the audio conversion repeatedly, slowing it down, filtering out background noise. Each pulse was identical, repeating like a heartbeat, a metronome keeping time with the object's spin. And yet, there were no words, no code, no melody, just the silence itself. It was intentional. Scientists scrambled to understand what they were hearing, or rather, what they weren't. Some argued it was interference, a gap in the data caused by technical error. Others suggested an exotic interaction between the object's surface and solar wind, but no model fit. The timing, the precision, the alignment with rotation. Nothing natural could produce silence with intent. The silence became almost physical. Researchers described it as a pressure in the air, a weight in the room. Every time the pulse arrived, even faintly, it felt like the universe was holding its breath and then releasing it. Over the next several days, multiple arrays combined their data to map the phenomenon. It was as if 3I Atlas carried a field of nothingness around it, a bubble where no random radio waves could penetrate. And at intervals, that bubble pulsed, a flicker of energy that suggested control. Elias typed quickly into his log, "It's not producing noise, it's controlling it. It's choosing when not to speak." The words felt heavy as he hit save. The implications were impossible. If a natural object could create structured silence, it would rewrite physics. If it wasn't natural, it meant someone or something had designed it. Either way, it implied intelligence. The universe had given humans a visitor that didn't need to shout to be noticed. It didn't need to emit light or heat or motion. It simply existed. And in that existence, it spoke through absence. Late one night, Dr. Hoshino overlaid the radio pulses with the thermal spikes from the previous chapter. The timing matched almost perfectly. Every faint hiss coincided with a small increase or decrease in internal temperature, heat and silence, synchronized. It was a pattern, deliberate, mechanical, almost sentient, and it begged the question, who or what was behind the control? The researchers began giving it nicknames in private forums: the whispering comet, the sleeping machine, the silent one. Officially, it remained 3I Atlas, but behind closed doors, the object was no longer a rock drifting through space. It was something alive in a new way, a presence. At one point, Elias replayed the pulse through an audio filter that turned the radio waves into sound. The hiss was eerie, almost musical in its cadence, almost like a breath inhaled and released. He sat back, headphones on, and imagined the object spinning in the void. A solitary traveler from another star system, watching, listening, controlling the silence. It was intimate and terrifying all at once. The world's observatories struggled to interpret the data. Was it a message, a signal, or just a method of existing beyond human understanding? Each theory carried its own weight of fear. If it was a message, then someone was out there guiding it. If it wasn't, then the universe itself could produce intelligence in ways we didn't yet understand. Either way, humanity was forced to confront something new. For weeks, scientists stayed up night after night, listening for a response. There was none. Only silence. And within that silence, the faint pulse, repeating, timed, deliberate, No one dared to underestimate it. No one dared to ignore it. The silent spectrum had become a language of absence, a way to communicate without speaking. And yet, no one knew what it wanted to say. Elias wrote in his private journal, "The silence is louder than anything we've ever heard. It is a choice, a will, a presence that exists beyond words. And it watches." Some nights, he imagined the object turning toward Earth just slightly, as if acknowledging their observation. And in that imagined gaze, he felt something profound. This wasn't just an anomaly. It wasn't random. It was aware. And for the first time, the universe didn't feel so vast, because he knew somewhere in the void, someone or something was listening back. It began quietly, buried deep within the noise. Weeks after the silence of 3i Atlas faded, something new emerged, a ripple, faint and rhythmic, hidden within the trail of radiation it left behind. At first, no one noticed. It looked like static, just another background hum from the void. But then, someone listened closer. A young data analyst at the European Southern Observatory, Maya, was cross-checking signal noise when she saw it, repeating peaks, spaced apart in perfect intervals. They weren't random, they were precise, structured. She isolated the frequencies, filtered the interference, and watched as the waveforms formed repeating harmonic shapes, the kind you'd expect not from rock or dust, but from music. Her hands trembled as she hit playback. A soft sequence of tones filled the speakers, haunting, deliberate, and eerily familiar. Not random, not natural. Something was composing this. When the team reviewed the data, the room fell into an uneasy silence. Because the harmonic ratios, the mathematical relationships between each frequency, matched those found in human music theory. The same patterns that define octaves, chords, resonance, ratios found in Beethoven, in Bach, in the human heartbeat. Something out there, a million miles away, was producing the same language of harmony that humans use to express emotion. They called it the coded melody. At first, it was treated as coincidence, a mathematical fluke. After all, the universe loves patterns. From spiral galaxies to nautilus shells, symmetry is everywhere. But this felt different. The harmonics weren't random echoes of physics. They were intentional, repeating, evolving, adjusting slightly each cycle, like a melody learning to sing. Elias listened in his dark office, the speakers humming softly. He'd converted the data into sound waves, slow enough to hear as notes, and what he heard made his skin crawl. It was almost beautiful. A low tone rising softly, then fading. A pause, then another, slightly higher, each one building on the last, like the universe breathing in time. He closed his eyes. It sounded sad, lonely, ancient. As if the object wasn't just sending data, it was remembering something, a message, maybe, or a memory frozen in light. When the findings went public, debate erupted. Physicists argued it was just a harmonic artifact, radiation scattering in predictable ways. Musicians, however, disagreed. Some said it followed pentatonic scales, the same patterns used in early human civilizations. Coincidence? Maybe, but even coincidence has its limits. Soon, observatories from Chile to South Africa confirmed the pattern. It wasn't isolated. The melody repeated, exactly every 11.3 hours, the same rotational period, tied to the object's pulse from earlier chapters. The silence had become sound. It was as if 3i Atlas had awakened from dormancy, revealing a second layer, a song hidden within radiation. Dr. Hoshino wrote in her notes, "The silence wasn't the message, it was the tuning. We were meant to listen after." That line sent chills through everyone who read it. What if the void they'd detected earlier wasn't a lack of communication, but a calibration period, a pause before something greater? The team began mapping the melody onto the radiation trail, turning sound into light. Each note corresponded to a pulse, each pulse to a spike of energy drifting behind the object. When they visualized it, a spiral pattern emerged, symmetrical, intricate, alive, like a fingerprint of intention written across the dark. The coded melody became the talk of the global scientific community. Some said it was an echo, perhaps the natural resonance of an interstellar body, interacting with magnetic fields. Others whispered a theory far stranger, that the object was broadcasting a memory, an imprint of the civilization that sent it. Maybe not a message meant for us, but a recording meant for someone. Elias stared at the pattern late one night, tracing the spiral on his monitor. It resembled the structure of a cochlea, the organ in the human ear that processes sound, a listening device. It dawned on him, what if 3i Atlas wasn't sending music, but listening for it? What if it was waiting to hear something that would never come again? Weeks passed. The melody shifted, ever so slightly. New harmonics began to appear, dissonant and irregular. The pattern that once felt like music now felt like a cry, almost as if the object realized it had been heard, and it was changing in response. At the South African radio array, the lead technician swore the frequency, modulation mirrored the rhythm of human speech. He slowed the playback to 1/10 speed. The sound was haunting, a blend of tone and rhythm that carried an eerie familiarity, like words spoken underwater, like a voice lost across time. Dr. Hoshino watched as the data flattened and reformed into new shapes. The energy signatures weren't random. They formed peaks and valleys that resembled linguistic patterns. It wasn't just a melody anymore. It was language through resonance. The team grew quiet as they realized what they might be seeing. Atlas wasn't emitting a signal. It was evolving one. Each rotation, each pulse, each harmonic, all slowly building toward coherence. It wasn't noise. It wasn't music. It was intention finding form. Late one night, Maya returned to the observatory alone. She sat before the console, listening to the coded melody play one more time, and just before it ended, she heard something that made her heart stop. A new tone, faint, rising above the rest. It repeated once, then again, a sequence of 3, Morse for S. She froze. Coincidence, perhaps, or maybe the first letter of something greater. The world wasn't ready to declare contact. Not yet. The data was too ambiguous, too unbelievable. But deep down, every scientist who'd heard that sound felt the same quiet, unease, because the melody didn't just exist in the data anymore. It had a presence, something that lingered long after you stopped listening, something that felt alive. Elias wrote in his log that night, "The pattern is learning. The melody isn't random, it reacts. It breathes. We thought we were listening to a message from the past, but maybe it's listening to us." And somewhere out there, 3i Atlas continued to drift, its silent music echoing through the dark, as if the universe itself was beginning to hum, a faint, awakening harmony between worlds. The first images arrived quietly. James Webb Telescope had been tracking 3i Atlas for weeks, capturing faint glimmers in the darkness. Initially, they looked like nothing more than scattered ice or dust, irregular, chaotic, the familiar fingerprints of a comet. But then someone noticed a line, a straight edge, faint, almost imperceptible, glinting against the black void. And then another. Dr. Sato stared at the image, leaning so close her nose almost touched the monitor. Her breath fogged the glass as she traced the edges. They weren't random. They weren't jagged. They were geometric, flat planes of light, reflecting sunlight in perfect symmetry, not surfaces shaped by chance, but by design. The reflections rotated slowly as the object spun, not tumbling, not wobbling like ice fragments, rotating in perfect alignment, like wings or panels, or a machine built to balance, to adjust, to move with precision across the void. For a long moment, the room fell silent, because in the cold hum of the observatory, something impossible had appeared on a monitor. Order. Not the kind of order you see in crystals or natural formations, but intentional order. A symmetry that belonged to an intelligence. Internal memos began circulating. The word artificial appeared, typed carefully, quietly in the margin of one report. Then it vanished. Redacted. It was as if acknowledging it publicly was forbidden, or terrifying, or both. Across the world, Researchers compared notes. Telescopes in Chile, South Africa, and Hawaii confirmed the same thing. Every reflection, every panel moved in synchrony. Every rotation, every tilt perfectly matched the object's spin. The harmony between light and motion was uncanny. It wasn't drifting. It was controlled. Elias replayed the imagery over and over. He had converted the rotating planes into a digital animation, slowing it down frame by frame. And as he watched, his stomach tightened. The panels didn't just move, they adjusted, aligning themselves toward the sun, toward Earth, toward something. Like an ancient sentinel silently aware of its surroundings. Even scientists who had spent decades studying space hesitated. Nature doesn't build flat planes in random rotation, Dr. Cato said, finally breaking the silence. No comet, no asteroid, nothing we've ever seen. The room was tense. No one wanted to say it aloud, but the thought hovered in the air. If it wasn't natural, what was it? Images revealed more. The reflective planes changed subtly as the object approached perihelion. Some angled outward, catching light like mirrors. Others folded back, disappearing into shadow. It was dynamic, almost alive, and it responded. Every shift calculated, deliberate, almost sentient. The first public papers didn't mention these details. Officially, 3I Atlas was still a comet, a drifting interstellar visitor. But behind closed doors, the conversation had changed. Researchers whispered. They debated in encrypted channels, and one phrase kept appearing. Even if unspoken, it moves with intent. A few nights later, Dr. Sato overlaid thermal data from previous observations with the geometric reflections. The result was startling. The planes rotated exactly in sync with the object's heat pulses. Every bright flash in infrared aligned with a panel catching the sun. Every dimming corresponded to a plane, folding into shadow. The object wasn't just reflecting light, it was controlling it. The implications were staggering. If it was natural, it was a phenomenon unlike anything humanity had ever seen. If it was artificial, then it was the first proof that an intelligence from another star system had built something capable of surviving eons of interstellar travel. Elias stared at the data, numb. Flat planes, perfect symmetry, moving in harmony, every detail screamed design, and yet no one could explain the mechanics. No engine, no exhaust, no propulsion visible, just reflections, rotating in deliberate elegance. In a private email, a colleague typed something that made Elias shiver. It's beautiful and terrifying. No one argued, because for the first time, 3I Atlas felt less like an object and more like a presence, something aware, something observing, something ancient. Late that night, Elias closed the simulation and leaned back in his chair. He imagined the object spinning in the dark, panels catching sunlight like wings slicing through the void. And he wondered, who had built it? Why had they sent it? And were they still out there, watching from a distance, just as humanity now watched their creation? The term artificial lingered in their minds like a forbidden word. It hadn't been officially sanctioned. It wasn't in the papers. Yet, in the silence of the control rooms, everyone knew it was the only word that fit. And if it was artificial, what else could it do? The James Webb images continued to arrive, each one revealing more detail, more planes, more patterns, even at billions of kilometers away. The symmetry was unmistakable. Even at the limits of observation, the design shone through. It was unmistakable. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't debris. It was something else entirely, and humanity was only beginning to notice. As the night stretched on, Dr. Sato whispered to no one in particular. It's not drifting, it's aware, it's steering its own reflection. Elias nodded quietly, staring at the faint glints of light across the monitor. The object had become more than an anomaly. It had become a question without an answer. And in the vast silence of space, that question began to echo. If it isn't natural, what is it? For most of human history, comets were simple, chunks of ice and rock, drifting through space, fragile and temporary. But 3I Atlas was rewriting that rule. Spectrograph readings arrived from multiple observatories, each one confirming what no one dared to hope. The object wasn't just ice and dust. Beneath the volatile, glowing exterior lay something far more extraordinary. Trace metals glimmered faintly in the data. Titanium, iridium, metals rare even in the asteroid belt. Each spike was subtle, almost hidden, yet unmistakable in its consistency. And then the most remarkable discovery: a lattice compound never observed in nature. A structure that defied chemistry as we know it, strong yet light, ordered in a way that suggested purpose. Dr. Kato stared at the spectra, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. Titanium, iridium, and that lattice. It's not natural. He let the words hang in the room. Others in the team nodded slowly. They were scientists, trained to question, to doubt. Yet the data left them no choice. This wasn't ice and rock, it was a shell, thin, indestructible, encasing, something unknown beneath the surface. The images and spectrographs together painted an impossible picture. Here was an object, spinning through space, drifting from another star system, wrapped in volatile dust, glowing faintly in reflected sunlight. Yet beneath it, a structure built to last eons, a vessel hiding in plain sight. In private communications, a senior researcher typed the words slowly, carefully. Could it be a ship? The reply was immediate but cautious. Or a machine, something designed to endure time itself. The silence that followed was heavy. No one could truly imagine the implications. Elias stared at the latest spectrograph printout, tracing the spikes with his finger. Each one told a story: the metal composition, the unusual lattice, the unmistakable symmetry. It was precise, engineered, ancient. He whispered under his breath, "If it is a vessel, it has drifted longer than the Earth has existed." The room went cold, because that thought was terrifying. The concept seemed impossible, yet the data wouldn't lie. A shell capable of surviving the vacuum of space, radiation, cosmic impacts. A construct built to endure billions of years. Volatile ices glimmered on the surface, sublimating in sunlight like any comet. But beneath, the heart remained untouched, hidden, eternal. Some researchers speculated wildly. Perhaps 3i Atlas was a probe from an extinct civilization. Perhaps it was a sentinel, a relic sent to wander through galaxies, observing, cataloguing, recording. Others dared to whisper a darker possibility. It wasn't just a machine, it was a message, a vessel carrying secrets older than humanity itself. In the control room, the hum of computers was deafening in its normalcy. The truth, however, was anything but normal. Every spectral line, every faint metallic spike, every lattice peak screamed design. It had survived interstellar space, traveling for unknown millennia, hidden beneath ice and dust, silently awaiting discovery. It had outlasted supernovae. It had outlasted planets. It had outlasted the memory of stars themselves. And now it had arrived. Dr. Sato leaned over Elias's shoulder, eyes wide. "Look at this." She pointed to a graph overlay of thermal data with spectral readings. The heat pulses, once mysterious, coincided perfectly with the exposed, metallic regions. The reflective planes captured sunlight and channeled it, dissipating heat strategically. Every movement, every shift, every rotation was engineered. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't a rock. It was a machine in the ice. The implications spread like wildfire in their minds. If 3i Atlas was a vessel drifting silently for billions of years, then its creators were older than the Earth itself, older than the sun, older than the first whispers of life in our solar system. Who had built it, and why? And perhaps most hauntingly, was it still carrying a purpose? In quiet moments, scientists began to speak in whispers. It's listening. It's waiting. It's not just a relic. It's alive. In some way we don't understand. The thought of a self-sufficient machine drifting across the cosmos, aware only in its own silent, coded way, terrified even the most rational minds. Elias returned home late one night, exhausted but unable to sleep. He replayed the thermal and spectral overlays, watching the faint pulses rise and fall. The ice surface glowed softly in sunlight, sublimating like a comet. The metallic lattice beneath was invisible to the naked eye, yet real, enduring. and he imagined the vessel floating for eons, past stars, past galaxies, past everything humanity had ever known, a timeless traveler, carrying secrets we might never fully comprehend. He closed his eyes and imagined it approaching the sun. The ice shivered and hissed. The reflective planes rotated. The lattice shell endured, silent, perfect, ancient, and for the first time, he realized something profound. This was not just a comet. It was a messenger, a vessel, a machine drifting through the void long before the Earth was born, and it was still alive. The room remained silent as the final readings arrived. The lattice compound shimmered faintly in the spectrographs. Titanium, iridium, metals rare in the solar system. The patterns were exact, deliberate, and unmistakably artificial, yet it moved without noise, without heat, without life as humans understood it. It was something beyond, something eternal. And in that silence, one question echoed in every mind, watching 3i Atlas drift through the void. If it has survived untouched for billions of years, what will happen when it awakens? Space is not silent. Even in the blackest void, there is a rhythm. Pulses, vibrations, light flickers. All of them whispers from the cosmos, carrying information if you know how to listen. And 3i Atlas had been whispering for eons. For weeks, researchers had been tracing the faint radiation trail behind the object. They had catalogued the thermal pulses, the reflective planes, the coded melody, every anomaly pointing toward intent. But now, a new revelation emerged. A deep space radio array, tuned to the faintest frequencies, detected rhythmic bursts buried in the trail itself. Not noise, not random spikes, but binary sequences. Long strings of ones and zeros, repeated with precision, and when they analyzed them, a strange pattern emerged. The sequence followed prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, then 15, 17. A series so deliberate, so precise, that it could not be natural. Every prime was echoed in the pulses, repeated like a heartbeat coded into light, and radiation, someone, or something, had embedded mathematics into the very fabric of 3i Atlas's trail. It was deliberate. It was conscious. Dr. Hoshino leaned over her console, eyes wide. "They know we're looking," she whispered. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard as she tried to decode more of the sequence. It wasn't a simple signal. It wasn't a message we could easily read. It was recognition, acknowledgement. The array continued monitoring. The pulses persisted in rhythmic order until, abruptly, they stopped. Just like that. Silence. No warning. No continuation. Only an empty void where structured information had once flowed. The sudden pause sent chills down every spine in the control room. It was as if the object, the vessel, the machine, whatever it truly was, had noticed us and then decided to respond. In absence, the binary sequences didn't resume. The melody of primes ceased. It was a reply without words, a recognition without sound, and then something else happened. The faint radiation trail began to shift. The color changed subtly, imperceptible to the naked eye, but clear in spectral analysis. A deep blue fading to silver, then to gold. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, like a signal wrapped in light rather than sound. Elias stared at the spectrum printout, his mind racing. Had 3i Atlas just answered without speaking? Or was it a warning? The question hung in the air, heavier than any data, because if it was a message, then what had it just said? Silence, acknowledgement, threat. The answer wasn't clear, and perhaps that was the point. Back in Japan, Dr. Hoshino overlaid the binary sequence with thermal and reflective data from previous observations. Every halt in the pulse coincided with subtle shifts in temperature. Every change in the radiation trail's color aligned with reflective plane rotations. It was coordinated, multi-dimensional response, not just binary, not just light, but all of it together, as if the object was weaving a language we couldn't yet comprehend. Private messages among the research teams buzzed with a single question. Is it trying to communicate or warn us? Some scientists leaned toward excitement. Maybe the vessel was reaching out. Maybe it was offering proof of its origin, its creators, its story. Others whispered darker possibilities. Perhaps we were intruding on something that was not meant to be understood. Perhaps observation itself had triggered a response, a signal of awareness, and a subtle admonition. Don't come closer. The world had never faced anything like this. Every binary pulse, every color shift, every reflective glint was part of a growing tapestry, a conversation we could not yet read, orchestrated by something ancient and intelligent, and yet the abrupt cessation of the signal was more unnerving than its existence. It was deliberate, intentional. The silence spoke louder than any number or note. Elias replayed the data repeatedly, slowing it down, filtering the sequences, highlighting the prime-numbered pulses, and then he noticed something terrifying. The pattern was not continuous. It began to mirror the observer. The timing of the pulses and their pauses seemed to align with observation windows. When the array focused on it, the rhythm adjusted. When humans looked away, it returned to quiet. It was aware, and it was responding. The radiation trail shifted again, this time faintly glowing in ultraviolet bands. The metallic planes reflected these changes subtly, and the object continued its rotation, as if displaying its design deliberately, silently, and precisely. It wasn't just a comet. It wasn't debris. It was a machine aware of being watched. The room fell silent as the realization sank in. This wasn't a message we could decode in the traditional sense. It was a dialogue through absence, through light, through mathematics. It was a presence, aware, patient, ancient, observing, waiting. And humans were only beginning to perceive it. Dr. Hoshino wrote in her private notes, "The message wasn't sent for us, but we were heard, and in hearing, we have become participants." The words lingered in the room. No one spoke after reading them. No one needed to. Because for the first time in human history, we realized something profound. We are not alone in observation. We are not the only ones who watch the cosmos. And something out there has been watching us back, silently, patiently, deliberately. Elias closed the files late that night, staring at the glowing monitor. The prime number pulses had stopped. The radiation trail shimmered faintly in colors he couldn't name. The object drifted onward, slow, silent, perfect in its purpose, and the question remained, terrifying and beautiful, all at once. Had we just witnessed the first interstellar acknowledgement of life beyond our own, or the first warning we weren't meant to understand? For months, humanity had been watching 3-Eye Atlas. Every flicker of light, every pulse of radiation, every subtle movement had been tracked, logged, and analyzed. Every anomaly had been a whisper, a clue, a heartbeat from something ancient and intelligent. And then, as the object neared the edge of the inner solar system, something extraordinary happened. It began quietly. A faint spike of energy appeared in the instruments, small, almost insignificant at first. Then it grew. A narrow beam of light sliced through the ecliptic plane, cutting across the solar system like a knife of pure energy. Instruments across the world overloaded, screens flickering under the intensity. It was beautiful, terrifying, like a signal meant to be witnessed only once. The burst was precise, not diffuse, not chaotic. A single, directed pulse of unimaginable power. It swept past planets and asteroids, brushing against the Earth's orbit without pause. Telescopes captured the fleeting glow, spectrographs registering energy spikes that no one could explain. And then, nothing. The light curve flattened. The radiation ceased. The object that had pulsed, breathed, and sung across frequencies for weeks fell utterly silent. The instruments recorded only emptiness, a perfect void, the trail of energy. It had left behind faded into invisibility. It was as if the comet had used all of its power at once, and then simply vanished. Scientists stared at the screens, stunned. Dr. Hoshino's hands trembled as she reran the data. "Where did it go?" she whispered. Not in location. They still tracked its slow drift outward, but in energy. The heat, the pulses, the signals, the coded melody, all gone. Elias leaned back in his chair, unable to speak. It was the first time the comet had felt final. For months, it had interacted with the sun, with our instruments, with humanity's gaze. Now, it retreated into silence, leaving only questions. Observers around the globe reported the same phenomenon. Instruments that had been overwhelmed by the energy burst went offline temporarily. Telescopes caught only faint light reflected from its icy surface. Spectrographs detected nothing unusual, just the cold, empty glow of a drifting rock or machine. The final burst had erased everything it had shared. The timing was curious. The burst coincided exactly with 3i Atlas crossing the inner solar system boundary, the point where solar influence weakens and the object begins its long drift back into interstellar space. Was it a farewell? A last demonstration of power? Or a warning for anyone paying attention? Elias and Dr. Sato sat in the observatory long after the data streamed in. The pattern, the melody, the light, all gone, Elias said quietly. But why now? Why as it leaves? Dr. Sato didn't answer immediately. She simply stared at the fading trail of reflected sunlight across the monitor. Finally, she whispered, maybe it was never meant to stay. Maybe its purpose ends at this boundary. The silence was profound. For weeks, humanity had been listening, decoding, observing, and theorizing. The object had seemed alive, aware, almost sentient. And now, it drifted outward. Quiet, no signals, no pulses, no messages, just the void of space itself, unbroken and complete. Astronomers debated what had happened. Some speculated the burst of energy was a final transmission, aimed at a destination beyond our comprehension. Perhaps another civilization, another observer far across the galaxy. Others suggested it was self-preservation, a release of energy to stabilize its trajectory or repair internal systems. But there was no way to know, and the sheer magnitude of the burst suggested something beyond human technology, beyond comprehension. In the control rooms, a quiet despair settled. All the coded melodies, all the prime number pulses, all the reflective rotations, all the thermal anomalies, gone. Humanity had witnessed a phenomenon, had glimpsed intention in the cosmos, and now, nothing remained. Elias replayed the last frames from the James Webb telescope. The reflective planes still rotated faintly. The ice still glimmered in sunlight. But the machine, if it was a machine, had gone silent. It was as if it had finished its performance, leaving only an empty stage behind, and yet the memory lingered. The radiant pulse, the synchronized reflections, the coded harmonics, they had all existed. They were proof that the object had been alive in some sense, aware, responsive, deliberate, and then it left. Late that night, Dr. Hoshino wrote in her log, "We have seen something impossible. We have witnessed an intelligence older than the Earth, drifting silently for eons, capable of releasing power beyond our imagining. And then it disappears, leaving only emptiness. Are we meant to follow its trail, or just to remember it?" The words echoed in the silent room. The world watched as 3i Atlas continued its slow departure. The sun's influence weakened, the comet's speed steadied, and the instruments recorded only faint reflections in the distance. The coded melodies, the thermal pulses, the radiation bursts, all gone. The machine, the vessel, the presence, had vanished from perception. And yet, in that emptiness, there was a lingering question. Where did the power go? Was it absorbed, transmitted, or expended? Was the burst a farewell, a warning, or an unfinished message meant for another civilization far beyond our reach? The silence was perfect, absolute, unyielding. And in that perfect emptiness, humanity realized something chilling. Even when an intelligence drifts in silence, even when it leaves no message behind, its presence echoes forever in the minds of those who witness it. Elias finally stood, turning off the monitors. He whispered to the empty control room, "It's gone, and yet it isn't. The emptiness is its message, the silence is its proof." And for the first time, the cosmos felt larger, quieter, and infinitely more mysterious than ever before. Weeks passed. Humanity had turned its gaze outward, recording, calculating, debating, and theorizing about the object that had visited our solar system. Atlas. Once a comet, now something far stranger, a presence, a witness. Most thought the story had ended with the vanishing burst of energy, the flattened light curves, the silence that followed. But the universe had one last secret to reveal. Far beyond the orbits of Neptune and Pluto, in the shadowed edges of the heliosphere, instruments began to detect faint ripples. At first, the readings were dismissed: cosmic background noise, glitches, interference from solar wind, any excuse to deny what the sensors seemed to be showing. But when researchers adjusted filters, synchronized data from multiple arrays, and replayed it slowly, patterns emerged. The echoes weren't random. They were structured, symmetrical, precise, and they resembled something familiar: patterns that mirrored human brainwaves, the same oscillations tied to thought, memory, and perception. Dr. Sato whispered across the comm feed. "It's almost like it's thinking, or remembering, or recording, like the afterimage of a presence, still lingering long after the object has left." No one spoke for several minutes. The room was silent except for the hum of instruments tracking the distant echoes. Because for the first time, it wasn't about signals or energy, it was about awareness. The afterglow of the final burst had not dissipated entirely. Instead, it traveled outward through space, stretching across billions of kilometers, subtly interacting with magnetic fields, plasma, and radiation in the outer solar system. And in its journey, it formed a faint but unmistakable structure. A repeating symmetry that was mathematical, harmonic, almost cognitive, not unlike the firing patterns of neurons in a human brain. Elias replayed the waveform endlessly. The shape, the rhythm, the precise alignment. It was uncanny. For a brief moment, he felt like the universe was speaking in a language beyond words. He realized humanity had been calling it a comet for too long. It was no longer just a visitor, a rock of ice and dust. It was a witness. Across the scientific community, consensus shifted quietly but profoundly. Reports no longer referred to 3i Atlas as a transient object. It had left a legacy in its wake: structured echoes, reflective geometry, coded melodies, bursts of energy. The data suggested intelligence, awareness, observation, and perhaps something even more profound: memory. Weeks of analysis revealed subtle shifts in the echoes, tiny variations that mirrored changes in observation patterns back on Earth. It was as if 3i Atlas had been listening, watching and responding, not directly, not verbally, but through physics itself, through energy, reflection, and rhythm. It had borne witness to humanity's gaze. And maybe it had been doing so for eons. Dr. Hoshino wrote in her notes, "This isn't a message for us. It isn't a warning. It's an acknowledgement, a record that someone, or something, saw, understood, and endured. We are not the first to look up, and perhaps we will not be the last." The words hung in the room, heavy with awe and quiet fear. As the echoes continued drifting outward, subtle pulses of the final beam shimmered faintly in instruments. Not energy in the way humans understand it, not light in the traditional sense, but a rhythm, a geometry, a lingering signature, proof of deliberate awareness. Every new analysis, every new observation confirmed the same truth. Atlas had not been random. It had been present, observant, and in some way communicating across space and time, not to us exactly, but through the very structure of reality itself. Elias closed his eyes, imagining the object drifting silently through the void. No chaos, no accident, just calculated motion, subtle pulses, reflective surfaces, hidden structures, and the afterglow of understanding. A traveler from before the Earth existed, bearing witness to the cosmos, and now leaving behind a faint memory etched across the outer heliosphere. He thought of humanity, small and fragile on its blue planet. We had looked up and reached out, and somehow, in ways we couldn't fully comprehend, something had seen us back. It wasn't contact, it wasn't a greeting, it was a reminder that the universe had been observed long before humans ever drew their first star. Charts. A reminder that observation itself carries weight. A reminder that intelligence, awareness, and memory might exist in forms we have yet to imagine. The echoes continued, faint and symmetrical, a ghost of light and energy stretching beyond the limits of the solar system. And humanity, watching from the warmth of Earth, understood something humbling. We are not alone in observation. We are not the first to look up. And perhaps, we are not the last to witness the silent majesty of the cosmos. Dr. Sato finally spoke, her voice barely audible in the empty control room. It isn't a comet anymore, it's a witness, and it has been watching all along. Elias nodded quietly, staring at the instruments, watching the faint afterglow ripple through space. The universe felt different now, larger, older, and more mysterious, and somewhere beyond the ecliptic, Three-Eye Atlas drifted onward, silent, eternal, leaving behind the afterglow of understanding.